Columbus International Airport was half empty that evening, the kind of Ohio twilight where the sky turns bruised purple before rain. I remember the sound first, the clack of Brian's expensive shoes on the wet pavement, the rolling suitcase behind him, and Monica's laugh echoing under the terminal roof. They didn't look back when they left me standing there with a paper bag of medication and $60 in my wallet. "Dad, you'll be fine here," Brian said, already halfway to the car. "We'll sort the house papers this week. Just rest. Doctor's orders." The car door slammed before I could even ask which doctor had given those orders. Then, the silver SUV pulled away, taillights flashing red like a closing wound. I stood there with my old duffel bag, same one I carried in '72 when I came home from Vietnam, watching my only son drive off into the wet Ohio night. The air smelled like jet fuel and betrayal. My name is Henry Lawson, 75 years old, retired Marine, 3 Purple Hearts, 1 dead wife, and apparently no home. They said it was temporary, a short stay at a budget motel near the airport, while renovations finished at the farm. But I knew better. I'd seen that same empty look in Brian's eyes the last time he shook my hand, the look of someone who's already written you off the ledger. The motel clerk didn't even bother to hide her pity. "1 night or 2, sir?" "One's fine," I said, though I knew I'd be there longer. I paid cash. Always pay cash when the world starts moving against you. Inside, the room smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke buried under lemon spray. The air conditioner rattled like an old diesel engine. I set my bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. My reflection in the cracked mirror looked unfamiliar. A soldier turned into a ghost. I took out my phone. The lock screen was a photo of Eleanor, my wife. Her smile still had that gentle stubbornness that got me through the war. She'd been gone 4 years, cancer, but her voice stayed with me. "Don't you ever let them walk all over you, Henry Lawson. You've faced worse." She was right. Because I already knew what Brian and Monica had done. 2 weeks earlier, I'd noticed something strange. My mail stopped coming, and the mortgage statements looked different. When I called the county office, the clerk hesitated before saying, "Mr. Lawson, the ownership transfer for 1198 Riverbend Road was already filed." Filed. I hadn't signed a thing. I confronted Brian that night at the farmhouse. He smiled like I was a confused patient in a nursing home. "Dad, you authorized me months ago. Remember? We agreed I'd handle the paperwork." He said it so calmly that for a second, I almost believed him. Monica filmed the whole exchange on her phone, pretending it was for transparency. But I wasn't confused. I'd spent half my life reading field orders and supply manifests. My handwriting hadn't been on those papers. My signature was clean and smooth, not the tremor-filled scrawl my right hand gives me now, forged. They must have thought the PTSD would make me doubt my own memory. They'd been whispering about long-term care options for months, planting seeds in neighbors' ears. Now, standing in that cheap motel room, I understood the full play. They'd taken my house, my truck, my bank cards, and even my doctor's number. They wanted me labeled incompetent, an old man with fading memories who couldn't fight back. But they forgot one thing. I'd survived Khe Sanh, Hue, and 50 years of bureaucrats. I knew how to fight wars you couldn't see coming. On the motel nightstand, I pulled out a small notebook, green leather, scuffed at the corners. Inside were names, dates, and one phrase Eleanor used to write at the bottom of every grocery list. "Be patient, but never passive." I opened my contacts list. One name glowed like a beacon: Colonel Raymond Blake, my old commanding officer, now a veterans attorney in Cincinnati. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but Marines don't forget their own. I typed a message. "Need advice. Family issue. Serious. Not safe at home." Within minutes, my phone buzzed. "Meet me Monday morning, 0900 hours. Bring everything you have." I closed the phone and leaned back. listening to the rain tap against the window. My chest ached where the doctors had cut me open last month, but the pain reminded me I was still alive, still dangerous, if underestimated. They thought I was finished. They thought I'd just fade away quietly, another old veteran too tired to fight. But they hadn't learned the first rule of war. Never assume the quiet man has surrendered. Sometimes he's just reloading. By sunrise, the motel curtains glowed faint orange. The storm had passed, but the air outside still smelled like wet asphalt and jet exhaust. I brewed the instant coffee packet the clerk left near the sink, then opened my notebook to the first page. Eleanor's handwriting was there, faded but steady. Riverbend Farm, paid in full, May 1986. That farm wasn't just dirt and fence posts. It was our whole life. Eleanor and I had built it together on a stretch of land just outside Waynesville, Ohio, where the Little Miami River bends through sycamores. I poured the foundation myself, every cinder block lined with sweat and pride. We raised cattle, grew corn, and in the summers, Eleanor filled mason jars with tomatoes for winter. When Brian was born, he learned to walk between those rows of corn. He used to call the red barn the castle. I used to believe the same. After Eleanor died, the house went quiet. For a while, I let Brian help with errands. Just until you get your feet back, Dad, he'd said. I was grateful then. Grief makes you blind. In the kindest way. That's when he started changing the small things. First, the mail went to his address. Then, my utility bills started arriving in his name. He said it was for convenience, that the online systems were too confusing for me. Then came the medication talk. Dad, he said one evening, spooning mashed potatoes into his own plate while leaving me a smaller one. You've been forgetting things. The doctor said to keep your dosage consistent. Let Monica handle your pills. I'd been taking the same meds, sertraline and prazosin, for years, prescribed for mild PTSD. Nothing major. But I let her. I was too tired to argue. Soon, Monica was filming everything. Just for safety, she claimed, smiling as her phone hovered near my face. When the garbage truck passed, or fireworks popped in the distance and I flinched, she'd whisper, "See? He's getting worse." One night, I overheard them in the kitchen. He doesn't even remember signing those documents, Monica said, voice low. Brian laughed. He won't remember anything once we move him into that care home in Dayton. My fork froze midair. They were talking about me like I was furniture being relocated. That's when I started recording them. It wasn't fancy, just a small black recorder I'd kept from my teaching days at the community college. I'd retired early to take care of Eleanor, but I still knew my way around technology. Every time Brian or Monica spoke, that recorder in my shirt pocket caught it. By February, I had hours of audio. Dad's confused again, Brian said on one recording. We'll need the doctor to confirm it soon. On another, Monica laughing, once he's declared incompetent, the house will be ours. We can refinance before summer. Each word was a bullet I kept polishing, waiting for the right time to fire. Still, I played the fool. I nodded when Brian called me buddy. I thanked Monica when she served me leftovers on paper plates while she and Brian ate from Eleanor's china. They thought humiliation would break me. But Marines don't break, we adapt. One morning, Brian left for work and forgot to close his laptop. That's when I saw the email, an appraisal from Hartfield Realty, valuing the farm at $420,000. Attached was a pending refinance application listing Brian Lawson as sole owner. They'd moved faster than I expected. I took photos of everything, emails, signatures, bank numbers, and sent them to my private drive. Evidence. That night, I sat alone in Eleanor's old chair by the fireplace. The farmhouse still smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, and the photographs on the mantel glowed in the lamplight. One showed Brian as a child, sitting on my shoulders during a Veterans Day parade. He was smiling wide, tiny hands, gripping my head. I stared at that photo for a long time, wondering when love had turned to entitlement. Maybe it always had been. Eleanor's voice echoed again. Be patient, but never passive. That night, I hid my recorder behind the kitchen clock. I made copies of every document I could find and stored them in a weatherproof tin under the porch floorboards. The next morning, Brian accused me of misplacing my wallet. Monica filmed it, of course, for proof. I smiled. Maybe I did, I said. Old age, you know. But the truth was sitting quietly in that tin box, the real deed, my financial statements, and 3 months of their own voices plotting against me. They thought I was falling apart. I was, in fact, building the case that would bury them. By spring, the whispers had started. Waynesville was the kind of small Ohio town where gossip moved faster than the wind that rolled off the cornfields. You couldn't walk into the diner without someone offering an opinion you didn't ask for. Poor Henry, they'd murmur when they thought I couldn't hear, his mind slipping. Bless his heart. Those whispers had Brian and Monica's fingerprints all over them. It began at the Veterans Appreciation Barbecue that the town hosted every April behind the fire station. Brian insisted I attend. Good for you, Dad, he said, clapping my shoulder with that fake smile. You'll get to see people who care about you. Translation: another stage to perform on. By noon, the place was packed: picnic tables, plastic flags, kids running around with face paint. The air smelled of burgers, charcoal, and cheap patriotism. I stood by the fence line, my old Marine cap pulled low, trying to stay out of sight. But Brian never let me stay invisible for long. He strolled from table to table, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Dad's doing better, he told Mrs. Edwards, who owned the flower shop. But the episodes are getting more frequent. Episodes? She asked, concerned. He sighed, the kind of sigh people use when they want attention. He gets confused. Last week, he tried to drive to the base he served at 30 miles away. Said he had orders. I had done no such thing. But the crowd nodded sympathetically. Everyone loves a good tragedy when it's not their own. Monica joined him a few minutes later, phone in hand. Brian, she said sweetly, maybe don't talk about his condition too much. Condition? Like I was a case study, not a person. Then she added, louder, he threw a plate last week. It scared me half to death. I could almost hear the camera recording. I turned away, focusing on the sound of a flag flapping against its pole, trying to keep my pulse steady. The smell of smoke made me flinch for half a second, an echo of a long-ago battlefield. But I steadied myself. That's when someone behind me said quietly, Sir, you all right? I turned. A man in his 30s, close-cropped hair, posture that spoke of discipline. The name patch on his vest read Hayes. Yes, son, I said. Just not fond of crowds. Understood, he replied. I'm Adam Hayes. Army, Iraq. I served with your old CO, Colonel Blake. He still talks about you at reunions. That got my attention. Does he now? I said, trying not to smile. Calls you the most stubborn Marine he ever met, Adam said with a grin. Then his eyes flicked toward Brian. You need help with something, sir? Because the way that man's talking, it's not right. Appreciate the offer, son, I said softly. Not yet. He nodded. Veterans don't need full explanations. A few words carry a lifetime of meaning. By late afternoon, Brian had his audience well trained. We're just trying to do what's best for him, he told the mayor's wife. The doctor says Dad's not capable of handling finances anymore. Monica added, he gets paranoid, thinks we're stealing from him. The laughter that followed was polite but sharp, like glass breaking quietly. I kept my eyes down, not because I was ashamed, but because I was documenting everything. My keychain recorder was running. Every lie, every insult, every laugh, they were all being saved in digital clarity. When the sun dipped behind the water tower, I made my way to the parking lot. Adam Hayes was there, leaning against his truck. You handled that better than most would, he said. Learned long ago That anger's just noise until you've got aim, I told him. He studied me for a second. Colonel Blake still practicing law out in Cincinnati? You think he'd take your call? He already has, I said. Adam smiled, understanding. Then I'll see you at the parade next month, sir. Maybe things will look different by then. They will, I said. They just don't know it yet. When I got home that night, Brian was waiting in the kitchen, leaning on the counter with that smug half-smile. Rough day, Dad? You wandered off for a while. Scared Monica. I met his gaze. Just needed some air. He shrugged. You'll get used to supervision. We all have to accept our limits eventually. I almost laughed. Limits. He poured himself a drink. Back turned. I looked at the framed photo of Eleanor on the wall, her eyes catching the lamp's reflection. Good night, son, I said quietly. He didn't hear the soft click of the recorder turning on again in my pocket. That night, I played the barbecue audio back on my laptop. Each voice was crystal clear, each lie a weapon being forged. Tomorrow, I'd send a copy to Colonel Blake. The war they thought I couldn't fight had already begun. 2 days after the barbecue, I woke before sunrise. Old habits die hard. Years in uniform will do that to a man, make him measure time not by clocks but by light. I made black coffee, sat at Eleanor's kitchen table, and stared at the wood grain worn smooth from decades of her hands. The house was too quiet. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. Somewhere upstairs, Monica's heels clicked faintly, followed by the buzz of Brian's electric razor, the perfect symphony of people pretending to care. I opened my phone and scrolled through my notes. Each entry began with a date, a brief description, and one word written in all caps: proof. April 4. Brian telling neighbors I forgot to pay the electric bill. April 11. Monica claiming I threw a plate. April 20. Conversation with Dr. Harris's assistant Brian had requested my full medical file without my consent. Every line was a small cut, but together they formed a wound big enough to bleed truth. That morning, after they left for work, I went to the shed behind the barn. It still smelled of engine oil and sawdust, exactly as I'd left it. Beneath the workbench, under a loose floor plank, sat an old metal lockbox. The edges were rusted, but the combination still clicked like a heartbeat when I turned it. Inside were the pieces of my past, the kind of past that could destroy lies built in the present. The first folder held the original property deed for Riverbend Farm, dated the 2nd of May, 1986. Purchased in full by Henry and Eleanor Lawson, no mortgage, no liens. The signature was mine, drawn in the precise slant Eleanor always teased me about. Next was a sealed envelope from Dr. Elaine Harris, my VA psychologist. I'd asked her for a competency evaluation last winter, anticipating what Brian might try. The report read, patient exhibits normal cognitive function for age, PTSD, well managed with medication. No indication of dementia or decline. So much for their confused old man narrative. Beneath that was a USB drive, the digital recorder I'd hidden under the kitchen clock for months. I plugged it into my laptop right there in the shed. The device hummed to life, and the first file played automatically. Monica's voice filled the room. He's signing slower these days. If we just get a notary to stamp those papers, we can submit them. Brian laughed. He won't remember signing anything anyway. Click. Another file. Monica again. Once we get control, sell the farm, pay off the credit cards, maybe buy something near Dayton. He won't even notice he's not on the deed. I leaned back in the chair, the sound of their voices turning from betrayal to evidence with each passing second. The last folder in the box was something I'd forgotten about. Until that moment, a joint savings account statement Eleanor had opened for emergencies. She'd named me the sole owner after her death. I'd almost forgotten it existed, but the balance over $180,000 was untouched. They didn't even know it was there. I smiled for the first time in weeks. By noon, I was driving toward Cincinnati, with the lockbox beside me in the passenger seat. The old Chevy rattled, but the engine still had fight in it, just like me. Colonel Raymond Blake's office was in a modest brick building near the courthouse. The same man who'd once shouted orders over mortar fire now wore reading glasses and a calm expression that could cut steel. "Henry," he said, shaking my hand. "It's been a long time." "Too long," I replied. He gestured toward a chair. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, I laid it all out. The forged papers, the recordings, the false rumors, the staged episodes. Blake didn't interrupt once. When I was done, he leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't incompetence, Henry. It's elder fraud and abuse. They're trying to build a legal narrative to take control of your assets." "I figured as much," I said. He tapped the report from Dr. Harris. "This here saves you. No court can declare you unfit with this on file." "So what's the next step?" "That depends," Blake said. "You want to do this quietly or publicly?" "What's the difference?" "Quietly means filing charges, freezing accounts, and letting lawyers handle it. Publicly means humiliation, exposure, in front of the whole town. One way heals slow, the other burns fast." I thought of the barbecue, of Monica's voice saying, "He's getting worse," as the crowd nodded. I thought of Eleanor's handwriting on the notebook. "Be patient, but never passive." "Publicly," I said. "If they made my suffering a show, they can watch their reckoning on stage." Blake nodded once, the way Marines do before a mission. "Then we'll make it count." He slid a document across the table, an affidavit template. "You'll sign this, confirming every incident, every conversation, and Henry record everything from now until the day we move." "Understood," I said. As I left his office, he called after me. "You sure you can handle it, old friend?" I smiled faintly. "I've handled worse." That evening, back at the motel, I uploaded the recordings to a cloud drive, labeled simply Operation Homefront. Then I wrote a single line in my notebook. "They took my house. Now I'll take back their truth." The war for Riverbend Farm had officially begun. By early May, the trees along Riverbend Road had turned the color of old copper. The air smelled of rain and tilled earth. Waynesville was waking up for summer, and the town was buzzing about the upcoming Memorial Day Parade, the biggest event of the year. That was when Colonel Blake called. "They've announced the parade lineup," he said, his voice steady but edged with something sharp. "Guess who the committee just selected as Grand Marshal this year?" I paused. "You didn't." "I did," he said. "And it passed unanimously." I almost laughed. "They'll never see it coming." "That's the idea," Blake replied. He laid out the plan like an operation briefing, crisp and precise. In 5 steps, we'd turn Brian's own performance into his downfall. Step 1. Make them confident. Blake arranged for the town paper to publish the news. The article read, "Local veteran Henry Lawson honored. As Grand Marshal family's support inspires community." Brian shared it across social media within hours. "Proud of my old man," he wrote, attaching a smiling photo of me polishing my medals. I could almost hear Eleanor laughing from wherever she was. Step 2. Draw them in. Blake invited Brian and Monica to a pre-parade family recognition ceremony at City Hall, promising that I'd sign final estate papers after the parade. I knew they wouldn't miss it. Greed makes punctual people. Step 3. Prepare the strike. Blake coordinated with Sheriff Nolan, who secured warrants for forgery, elder fraud, and theft. He also arranged for Sergeant Adam Hayes, the young veteran from the barbecue, to be assigned to event security. Step 4. Control the narrative. I handed over all recordings and evidence to Blake's paralegal. Every lie, every whisper, every video Monica had filmed, for safety, was copied into a secure drive. Blake had already sent transcripts to the county prosecutor. And step 5. Turn their story against them in public. On the surface, I went along with Brian's show. He visited more often, full of sudden affection. "Dad, You'll need a new suit for the parade, he said, straightening my collar. Monica hovered nearby, smiling like a politician's wife. Maybe after the ceremony, we can talk about your long-term care options, she said sweetly. You'll be more comfortable once everything's in our name, settled. Of course, I said. Wouldn't want to rush things before the big day. She grinned, thinking she'd won. The next week, the town was blanketed in banners. Honor our heroes, and my picture hung in front of the city hall. Medals glinting against the marine dress blues I hadn't worn in 20 years. Neighbors stopped me on the street. You must be so proud, Henry, they said. Your son's really looking out for you. I'd smile politely. He sure is. In truth, I spent those days preparing my final speech. I wrote it by hand, every word measured like ammunition. It wasn't about anger. It was about truth and dignity. Each night, I rehearsed it to Eleanor's photo on the mantel. They called me broken, Elle, I'd whisper. Let's show them what unbroken looks like. 2 days before the parade, Blake and I met at the VFW hall to finalize everything. The smell of old wood and coffee reminded me of the barracks. Sheriff Nolan's ready, Blake said, flipping through the file. We'll serve the warrants as soon as you're done speaking. You'll hand me the envelope. I'll hand it to the deputies. Simple. And the audience? About 800 people, he said. Half the county's coming. The whole thing's being live-streamed. Perfect, I said. They started this performance. Let's finish it with an audience. Blake leaned back. You sure you can hold up under the pressure, Henry? I know this isn't just about money. I nodded. It's about Eleanor. It's about every veteran who got called crazy just because they flinched at fireworks. He didn't argue. Marines don't need extra words when the mission's clear. That night, back at the farmhouse, I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture Eleanor and I had chosen together. Her favorite quilt lay folded on the sofa. I placed my medals beside it and whispered, Tomorrow, we get our house back. Outside, thunder rolled over the Ohio hills. Rain started tapping against the windows, soft and rhythmic. I packed my uniform, the real deed, and the manila envelope marked Evidence, Riverbend Farm. Then I sat by the window with a cup of black coffee and watched lightning cut through the sky. It looked like the world itself was drawing a battle line. By morning, I'd cross it. Memorial Day morning broke clear and gold, the kind of crisp Ohio sky that made the flag colors look sharper than usual. I'd been up since 5. Some habits, like service, never leave you. The dress blues fit tighter than they had 20 years ago, but I pinned every medal exactly where it belonged. The bronze star on the left, 3 purple hearts below it. My reflection in the mirror stared back, like an old photograph. Not the frail man my son described to neighbors, but a Marine ready for formation. At 9:30, Brian and Monica pulled into the driveway in their spotless black SUV, the same car they'd bought using my account. I stepped onto the porch, medals catching the sunlight. Dad, you look incredible, Brian said, his voice sugary. Monica lifted her phone immediately, recording. We're so proud of you, she cooed. Waynesville's going to see what a hero you are. Hero. Funny how easily that word rolled off her tongue when there was a crowd to impress. You ready for the parade, Dad? Brian asked. Always, I said. You driving? He grinned. Of course. You just enjoy the moment. I smiled, sliding the manila envelope marked Evidence, Riverbend Farm into the inner pocket of my coat. Oh, I planned to. The downtown square was already packed. Red, white, and blue banners draped from shop windows. Children waved paper flags. The high school band tuned their brass under the gazebo. At the front of the procession sat a gleaming red convertible with a sign taped to the side. Grand Marshal, Sergeant Major Henry Lawson, Ret. Brian's chest puffed like he'd earned the title himself. He guided me to the car, shaking hands, nodding to familiar faces. Proud day for our family, he told anyone who'd listen. I watched his every gesture, the way he angled his body toward the cameras, how he never actually looked at me when he said, "family." The parade rolled forward at 11 sharp. The band played "America the Beautiful," and the crowd cheered as the convertible eased down Main Street. People clapped, waved, and saluted. Kids pointed at my medals, wide-eyed. For a few minutes, I let myself remember what it used to feel like to march with brothers who'd earned those cheers through blood and dirt, not deceit. Halfway down the route, we reached the reviewing stand. Mayor Douglas was waiting, microphone in hand, flanked by Colonel Blake, Sheriff Nolan, and a few county officials. I saw Sergeant Hayes standing at the foot of the stage, eyes scanning the crowd, subtle nod my way. Brian and Monica stood in the front row, their phones raised, smiles gleaming. The convertible stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, "please welcome our Grand Marshal decorated veteran, local hero, and lifelong resident, Sergeant Major Henry Lawson." Applause swelled. I rose slowly, the medals catching full Sunday. My heart thudded steady. "Thank you," I began. 50 years ago, I swore an oath to defend my country. I never imagined I'd have to defend my own home the same way. Brian's smile flickered. Monica lowered her phone an inch. "I stand here not just as a veteran," I continued, "but as a man accused by his own blood of losing his mind." I let those words spread. I let them believe I was broken. Because sometimes you win a battle not by striking first, but by letting your enemy show his weapon. The crowd went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. I was told I'd signed my house away, that I was too confused to handle my own life, that I needed guardians. I reached into my coat and pulled out the envelope. So I brought proof of every forged document, every stolen dollar, every recording where my son and his wife planned to put me in a nursing home while they sold the land I built with my own hands. Gasps rippled through the square. Brian took a step forward. "Dad, that's not true. He's confused." "Confused?" I said, my voice rising. "Then maybe you can explain why the county recorder has a copy of this deed with your forged signature on it." Blake stepped forward, crisp as ever. "That's enough, Mr. Lawson," he said, addressing Brian. "Sheriff Nolan, you have the documents." The sheriff nodded and handed a folder to his deputy. "Effective immediately," Blake announced. "Brian Lawson and Monica Lawson are under investigation for elder fraud, forgery, and financial abuse." The crowd erupted voices, camera flashes, murmurs. Monica went pale. "This isn't happening," she whispered. Brian tried to grab my arm. "Dad, please, let's talk about this privately." I pulled away. "No, son. You made it public. Let's keep it that way." Blake's voice boomed over the microphone. "This veteran may be 75, but he's more competent and honorable than most men half his age. The proof is here, witnessed by everyone." As deputies stepped forward, Brian's shoulders sagged. His arrogance drained into panic. Monica dropped her phone, the screen shattering on the pavement. I looked out over the crowd faces I'd known for decades, now staring at me not with pity, but respect. "Some battles," I said into the microphone, "you fight with guns, others with patience. Either way, a Marine never retreats." The crowd rose to its feet, applause thundering down Main Street. As the deputies led Brian and Monica toward the waiting patrol car, I caught a glimpse of Adam Hayes standing by the curb, saluting silently. I returned it. The band struck up the anthem again. The parade continued, but this time, the cheers weren't for ceremony. They were for justice. The parade ended like most wars do, cheers echoing over wreckage. By the time the band packed up their instruments, Brian and Monica were gone, escorted out by Sheriff Nolan's deputies, while the crowd still murmured in disbelief. I stayed behind on the reviewing stand, watching people file out, shaking hands with Colonel Blake, Mayor Douglas, even Sergeant Hayes. They all said the same thing. "You did the right thing, Henry." Maybe I did, but the right thing never feels clean. It feels heavy, like the weight of those medals on my chest. That night, I sat in my living room alone for the first time in 3 years, without fear someone was listening. The ticking clock filled the silence where their whispers used to live. The house felt like mine again. But victory, as always, came with an aftertaste bitter and necessary. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Lawson. This is Deputy Nolan. You might want to come by the courthouse tomorrow morning. There's been a development. Good or bad? I asked. He hesitated. Both. When you've served long enough, you learn that both is where truth hides. The next morning, I met Colonel Blake outside the courthouse. He handed me a coffee and a thin folder. The county prosecutor's filing formal charges. But there's more. I flipped open the folder. The top page was a property audit, Merrick & Co. Real Estate Holdings, dated 2 months prior. My farm was listed as a pending asset in a development deal worth $3.2 million. They tried to sell it, I whispered. Already did, technically, Blake said. Signed with a developer named Merrick Holden. Your son planned to close the sale next week. We traced the down payment $75,000 straight into Brian's personal account. I stared at the page. They were going to demolish the farm and subdivide it into luxury lots. Riverbend Estates. My fists clenched. Eleanor's land. The same land we built with our hands. Blake nodded. But here's the twist, Henry. The land can't be sold. Not legally, not ever. I frowned. What do you mean? He smiled slightly. Back in 1994, the Department of Agriculture registered part of your property as protected farmland through a program Eleanor applied for. It was renewed automatically after her death. Every deed since then carries a clause no commercial or private sale without federal clearance. Which means what your son and Merrick did isn't just fraud, it's federal fraud. I blinked, letting that sink in. They committed a crime against the government? Exactly, Blake said. And they didn't even know it. He placed a second document on top of the first, an official notice from the FBI's Columbus field office. Active investigation, property fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. They'll be lucky if this stays in county court, he added. Right now, the feds want everything. Emails, transactions, recordings. I sat back, speechless. The same land that had been my curse had just become my shield. Eleanor, unknowingly, had saved us 30 years ago. By noon, the story broke online. Veteran's son, under federal investigation for property scheme. Comments flooded, in some angry, some sympathetic, all shocked. That evening, I received a call from Merrick Holden himself, the developer who'd tried to buy my farm. His voice trembled. Mr. Lawson, please, I didn't know your son forged anything. He said he had power of attorney. You didn't check? I asked. Well, he seemed trustworthy. Then you'll testify to that in court, I said. He hesitated. If it means avoiding prison, yes. Good, I said, and hung up. 2 days later, Brian's attorney requested a meeting. Blake and I sat across from them in the small courthouse conference room. My son looked nothing like the man who'd stood smirking at the barbecue weeks before. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair unkempt, suit wrinkled. Monica wasn't there. She'd already turned state's witness to save herself. Dad, he started, voice shaking. I made mistakes. Blake interrupted. Your client doesn't get to rebrand theft as mistakes. Brian swallowed hard. I was trying to provide for my family. By stealing mine? I asked. He looked down. I thought you'd forget. I laughed softly. You thought wrong. Marines forget nothing. His attorney leaned forward. Mr. Lawson, my client is prepared to return the funds and sign over any claims if you agree not to pursue federal charges. Blake and I exchanged a glance. That's not our decision anymore, Blake said. The Department of Agriculture and the FBI already filed joint jurisdiction. The deal's out of your hands. Brian's face went gray. You mean... I said quietly. You tried to steal the one thing you never earned. And now, it's the law that's taking everything you thought was yours." Silence fell. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside into the sunlight. The courthouse lawn was covered with small flags from the parade, still fluttering in the wind. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, just peace. The kind that comes when a battle finally ends, and you realize survival itself is victory. That night, I drove home down Riverbend Road. The farm was glowing in the sunset, the fields alive with gold light. Eleanor's wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze. I parked the truck and stood in the yard, listening to the distant hum of crickets. They'd tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was already rooted. Eleanor once told me, "Truth grows slow, but it grows deep." And now it had. Summer settled slowly over Waynesville. The smell of cut hay drifted from the fields, and for the first time in years, Riverbend Farm sounded like home again. Birds in the rafters whined through the corn, the steady creak of the porch swing Eleanor loved. 3 months had passed since the parade. The news stories had faded, but the memory hadn't. Everyone in town still remembered the moment a trembling old Marine exposed a son who thought he was untouchable. Brian's trial moved quickly. Facing evidence, recordings, and federal filings, his lawyer struck a deal: 2 years probation, full restitution of the stolen funds, and 500 hours of community service at the county VA hospital. The court's decision wasn't cruel, it was instructive. And that was enough for me. Monica had already left him, filing for divorce and disappearing to another state. I wasn't surprised. Loyalty built on greed collapses fast when the money runs out. Colonel Blake came by often, usually with Sergeant Hayes and his family. They'd bring barbecue from the diner, and we'd eat on the porch until the light dimmed behind the hills. The younger veterans called me Old Man Henry, and somehow that title fit better than victim. The farm itself had taken on new life. Blake helped me establish a nonprofit veteran training program, the Riverbend Agricultural Project, designed to teach returning soldiers sustainable farming and land management. What was once a battlefield of betrayal had turned into a place of rebuilding. Every morning at sunrise, I walked the perimeter fence, checking the posts, and remembering how Eleanor used to leave wildflowers tied to them in spring. Now, sometimes, I found small flags, instead left by local veterans, who came to thank me for standing up when no one else would. The most unexpected visit came from Brian himself. It was late August, and I was trimming the vines near the barn when a car door slammed on the gravel drive. I turned and saw him standing there, thinner, older, eyes hollow from shame. "Dad," he said quietly. I set the shears down. "You shouldn't be here." "I know, I just needed to see the place." He looked around at the fields, the barn, the porch swing. "I spent my whole life wanting this land. Never realized it was never the land, it was you." I didn't speak. He swallowed hard. "I was angry," he said. "Angry at how easy you made it look. You worked all your life and still had peace. I thought if I had what you had, I'd feel it too." "And did you?" I asked. He shook his head. "I felt nothing. I ruined everything." For a long time, we stood there with the summer air heavy between us. "I can't change what I did," Brian continued. "But if the court lets me, I'd like to help with the program. The veterans thing. Even if I just clean barns." I studied him. For the first time, his words sounded like something close to truth. "We'll see," I said. "You'll have to earn your way, same as any man." He nodded, eyes wet, then left without another word. When his car disappeared down the road, I sat on the porch and felt Eleanor's presence beside me, quiet and approving. Later that week, I met with the first group of veterans, starting the program, 6 men and women from different wars, each carrying their own invisible weight. We spent the morning planting new seedlings, laughing, working, sweating under the Sunday. At one point, Sergeant Hayes's daughter, little Emma, asked me why I still wore my medals on the porch. "So I don't forget," I told her. They're not for fighting. They're for surviving. She smiled. You survived a lot, huh? Still am, I said. That evening, as the day faded, I brewed coffee and watched the horizon turn amber. The land stretched wide and quiet, a canvas of peace painted over years of chaos. I realized then that revenge had never been my true goal. It was restoration. I hadn't wanted to destroy Brian. I wanted to reclaim myself. When people ask what I learned from all this, I tell them simple truths. That age doesn't make you weak. Betrayal doesn't make you broken. And silence isn't surrender. It's the space where strategy grows. Sometimes justice takes years to find its voice. But when it finally speaks, it doesn't shout. It speaks in calm, steady tones like the sound of wind through the corn, reminding anyone who listens that integrity, like land, endures. As night fell, I took one last walk along the fence line, the stars bright over the Ohio fields. I stopped, touched the wooden post where Eleanor used to leave her flowers, and whispered into the dark, "We made it home, Elle. We really did."